There is no brand better at brand synergy than Disney. From every corner of business that they own, which let's be real feels like 90% of the media world at this point, they are constantly mushing brands together and having the entire roster of talent interact with one another to remind you that this is the wonderful world of Disney. And the most egregious example of this was Disney Channel, especially like golden age era Disney Channel. For a stretch of time, it felt like all of Disney Channel's programming was being run off the talent and sheer willpower of like 10 teenagers. They quite literally touched every corner of the Walt Disney Company that they could. They were in live action shows, they were in animated shows, they were in interstitials. Hell, they took them to the Disney parks as many times as they could. As many times as they could get you to ride the brand new rock and roller coaster and have your favorite stars riding that ride, and in turn encourage you to go and ask your parents to take you to Walt Disney World, and then they promptly say no. They had them kids working. They were everywhere, and most memorably, they were in music videos. Yes, the House of Mouse tasked this squadron of mini stars to be perfect in almost every aspect. They had to look the part, they had to act the part, and they had to sing the part. Now, to be fair, this was kind of standard for child stars at the time. It's not quite like today, where a kid can do one thing candidly on camera, get a brand trip out of it, and be exploited before they even know how to write their own name. No, back in the days of yore, kids were required to be good singers, be good dancers, be good actors, have weird adult-like charisma, and also be cute as a button before they were worthy of our attention, and then they were exploited. That's the difference. The Disney Channel's star machine is very well known, so let's take a look specifically at the music cog of that machine. Hi, I'm Bobby. Welcome to Culture Kid. The late 90s going into the early 2000s, Disney Channel was not the Disney Channel that I think we know and love. Disney Channel has been around for a very long time, and its most early years were really like family centric. And you can make the argument that like, well, it's still family centric. Yes, it was, but it was like family first. You were watching it like as a group, or if it was their like during the day programming, it was courting kind of a much younger audience. So that's where you get the like Disney afternoon lineup with DuckTales and Goof Troop and shows like that. But in the 90s, Disney was kind of going head to head with a lot of other things that were definitely stealing attention from like a teen audience. Like they definitely had programming that tweens and teens could like and could enjoy, like the all-new Mickey Mouse Club that gave us Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera and Justin Timberlake, etc., etc. But Disney didn't quite have the hold on like the teen, specifically tween audience that they would in the early 2000s, because in the 90s there was a lot more competition in that space. Not to say that that competition lightened up as we got into the early 2000s, but in the 90s you had MTV, which was a really big contender in teen adjacent programming. It was a little bit more older teen than younger teen, closer to tween, but the way that the tween audience was treated at that time was just like preteen. Essentially what was good for the teen goose was good for the tween gander. So if a teenager was watching TRL, their 10 to 13-year-old little sibling wanting to maybe be like them was also probably watching TRL. It's also important to note that MTV was going through a bit of a change as well. I'm getting off into a lot of tangents, but I promise you this will make sense.
Consider the following.
So MTV in the 80s, around its advent, was this like haven for rock and rap and a lot of like more mature genres than pop. In the 80s going into the 90s, you had programming like Headbangers Ball and Yo MTV Raps, and these were shows that were dedicated to specific genres. And then as we move into the 90s, and especially as we see the growth in the bubblegum pop genre, MTV kind of turns its attention towards that. Not to say that it completely abandoned rock and rap as genres that they were regularly talking about and covering, of course, but it is to say that moving into the 90s, especially with the advent of TRL, the focus was on what are the teens listening to? Like, what pop music are they listening to? Yes, they were covering a lot of genres, but pop became the genre that they were centering in their programming. Now, if I'm putting my pop culture historian and pop culture analysis hat on, I would say that with MTV pivoting to more reality based programming into the early 2000s to mid 2000s to late 2000s, that opened up the door for who could inform what the teens were watching and what they were listening to, because that programming may not have resonated with them in the same way. And so I think that's where we get Disney Channel becoming what it became in the early 2000s. Like I said, it all wraps back around. And of course, within their own market of like children's based channels, Nickelodeon was also a pretty big contender too. If I'm being real, I think 90s Nickelodeon gave the blueprint of where Disney Channel would eventually go in the early 2000s, because 90s Nickelodeon had a really even split of great live action programming with shows like All That, as well as a really strong animated show lineup. And eventually that model would be adopted by Disney Channel going into the early 2000s. If you're familiar with like golden age Disney Channel, you know that the like tween market was a really strong market that Disney had a hand on. There began to be this really strong delineation of like the tweenager versus the teenager. Like, we've always had the preteen as like a marketing group to be sold to. Tween began to have its own flavor and feel and style to it that I think Disney Channel was a really big informer of. So towards the end of the 90s, gone are the days of the like family TV movies. We're starting to see more programming that would eventually inform what Disney Channel would become. Around 2000 to 2001, we get shows like Lizzie McGuire, Even Stevens, The Proud Family, Kim Possible, and of course, That's So Raven. The Disney Channel music video industrial complex TM can be broken down into different sectors that range from quite insular to rather broad. So to make things easier, I have made an internet-friendly graph to serve as a bit of a visual aid. In the outermost rim, we have artists adjacent to Disney Channel. These would be considered the secular music in the Church of the Mouse House. These would be artists and songs that don't necessarily feature a Disney IP, so they're not like doing a Disney Mania song, or they're doing a song for a specific DCOM. These are just songs that were in turn created or covered by these artists that were featured in a lot of Disney Channel products. So what comes to mind is like Beautiful Soul by Jesse McCartney. Like, could you hear that song outside of a Disney Channel context? Yes, absolutely. But were you absolutely going to hear it within a Disney Channel context? Yes, you were. You might also see the singers of these songs featured in the products themselves, so like in the DCOMs or in the TV shows as like a guest star, but there wasn't really an intention for that person to become like a regular on the show or like to become a part of the Disney Channel star machine. Secular really is the apt term for this little outer rim because they were artists that weren't necessarily automatically labeled as like Disney teeny bopper musician. They had a little bit more mobility when it came to how they were perceived, I think, within the musical industry. Now, I think these artists very well might have been courting the same exact audience that Disney Channel was, but they weren't stamped with the moniker of being a Disney Channel star. And honestly, to put it plainly, it's just very Radio Disney. That's essentially what it is. Radio Disney, for those who are unfamiliar or don't remember, was exactly what it sounds like. It was a radio station that was launched by Disney in 1996 as a station dedicated to playing mainly bubblegum pop artists like Britney Spears or the Backstreet Boys. Essentially, artists that the channel's core audience would also be listening to. Which brings us to these next two bubbles, which are musicians turned Disney Channel stars and Disney Channel stars turned musicians. They're really one and the same in a lot of ways, and honestly, these two bubbles could just be called Hollywood Records. What is Hollywood Records? Oh my gosh, thank you so much for asking. Hollywood Records is the music label subsidiary of the Walt Disney Company, or at least one of them. And many artists that would go on to find fame on the Disney Channel were signed with Hollywood Records. So Allie and AJ, Selena Gomez, I think Sabrina Carpenter is still maybe signed with them or was signed with them at a certain point. If you were a Disney Channel star that were putting out solo projects as far as music went, you were signed with Hollywood Records. Now, to be fair, Hollywood Records is not just the Disney Channel music label brand. It also, in the early 90s, around 1990, acquired the entire catalog for Queen. So they do have artists that are outside of the Disney Channel bubble, but like, it's mainly the Disney Channel music label, let's be real. Now, it is important to note that there were plenty of Disney Channel stars that were not necessarily signed to Hollywood Records and had intentions of making music, but they still were singing. Disney still told them to get in the booth. We'll get there. Music really became a really prominent part of Disney Channel's identity around this time as well. So you were constantly seeing like musical episodes of shows, or you would see like music videos for the stars of the show that you were just watching. Like during the commercial break, you'd see their music video. Like there were so many instances where music was like kind of woven into the brand identity of the channel that you really couldn't escape it. Like if you were watching Disney Channel shows, you were also listening to Disney Channel artists' music as well. So going back to Radio Disney in the early 2000s, again around 2001, Disney saw Radio Disney as an opportunity to basically be a listening party for their Disney Channel stars' music to an audience that was watching their shows and in turn would be most likely to buy their music. They were essentially setting up a family-friendly pipeline from TV to music that kept kids synergetically locked into the brand. So you could go straight from Disney Channel to Radio Disney and listen to your favorite stars and then go and buy their album, and you never really had to stray outside of the Disney bubble to do so. In turn, you keep them locked in with the brand forever. The thing that would serve as like the point of success for Hollywood Records was the success of Hilary Duff's album Metamorphosis from 2002, which has like Come Clean and So Yesterday, like a banger album, absolutely. But that essentially showed Disney that this pipeline that I was talking about, this synergetically would keep kids locked into the Disney brand, could work. Hilary Duff had been on Lizzie McGuire for maybe around a year or so when that album came out, so she already kind of had a baked-in audience that was more than likely going to buy the album anyways. And it doesn't hurt that the album was pretty solid. It just really showed the label that if they got the stars of these shows to churn out an album, they basically had a built-in audience that was ready to buy. And that audience was not small in any way, shape, or form. And soon it followed that almost every prominent Disney Channel star would be signed to Hollywood Records and would put out an album at a certain point. And it's really interesting that the music of this era, so I'm thinking like Raven, I'm thinking Allie and AJ, I'm thinking Hannah Montana, like it was labeled Disney music, but it did have crossover appeal. Now, mind you, Disney Channel music doesn't have the same, I don't think conjures the same mental image as like Disney music. Like, I think there are two very important distinctions when it comes to this. Like, Disney music, in the way of like songs featured in Disney animated products, are very insular. They're very contained. It feels very much so like you hear them in very specific circumstances and you kind of have to like seek them out. Whereas Disney Channel music had much more crossover appeal. Like, yes, of course, the people making these songs like Demi Lovato or Miley Cyrus or Selena Gomez or Raven definitely were known to be Disney Channel stars. However, they did have songs that began to have crazy crossover appeal. Like, for example, Party in the USA was a Hollywood Records song. Like, Miley Cyrus was signed to Hollywood Records when Party in the USA came out. And I just checked for this video, that song has 1 billion views on YouTube. So needless to say, crossover appeal was like the big thing. Yes, Miley Cyrus at that time was like a Disney Channel star. She was Hannah Montana, but the Party in the USA was still charting like crazy. So depending on which era of Disney Channel you're looking at, that moniker of being like a Disney Channel star wasn't as much of an impediment as it might have been. Now I will say, I think in the early days of the channel, when it began to really find its footing, in that like early 2000s period, I think it definitely was a bit more of a hindrance, you could say, like in that the Disney Channel star as like a pop cultural archetype hadn't been fully realized just yet. So it was like, oh, you make music and it just only appears on Disney Channel. You are going to have a harder time kind of crossing over into like more mainstream non-Disney music versus going into the late 2000s with artists like Selena Gomez and Miley Cyrus and Demi Lovato and the Jonas Brothers. Like, they were Disney stars and they were always known as Disney stars, but they still could have a song on the Billboard Top 100, or they could very well like have songs that were outside of the Disney Channel bubble, even though it wasn't as likely. Like, I feel like they could, you know what I mean? The main thing to note is that at this point in our bubble, in our little like graph and circle, the hearts are still in it. There isn't this feeling that the people in these bubbles are having musical careers like thrust upon them. Like, everyone in this bubble feels like they wanted to make music. Like, they were wanting to pursue musical projects outside of their shows. Like, the only times that they were singing weren't just in the context of like an episode or like during a decom. Like, they wanted to pursue music. That sentiment begins to break down just a bit. And it brings us to our last bubble, which is the Disney Channel Circle of Stars slash Disney's Friends for Change slash Disney Mania. Now, this bubble is the most insular because these are songs that already kind of exist within the Disney canon. I think the most egregious example of this, or like the part of this bubble that I think I really want to hone in on, is the Disney Channel Circle of Stars, which was essentially the impetus for this entire video. It is music for the sole intent of being kind of like posited around the Disney brand. Like, they're singing Disney songs, they're Disney Channel stars singing Disney IP songs. And these songs feel the most corporately mandated, let's just say. This is the most corporately mandated circle in this whole thing. There's corporate interests at every single level of this graph, but this is the most egregious example of that. If you don't know, the Disney Channel Circle of Stars was essentially this conglomerate of Disney Channel's best and brightest at any given point in its history. They would bring them all together to sing a song that everyone already knows with like a little bit of a different arrangement, and it was just a good opportunity to see the stars of your favorite shows essentially just interacting with one another. In preparation for this video, I watched Christy Carlson Romano's, which, if you're not familiar with who she is, she played Ren on Even Stevens, and she's also the voice of Kim Possible. And she's, in recent years, kind of very much so built up a brand around pulling the curtain back on Disney Channel and like what it was like to be a star at that time on the channel. And she has a video talking about the Disney Channel Circle of Stars, and she essentially is just like, this is like one of the only times we would ever hang out with one another. Like, the music videos were meant to show that, like, or at least convey that, yeah, these were stars from different shows, but they all like know each other because they're all Disney Channel. Like, they're all Disney Channel stars. Like, they all play for the same team. Mind you, them kids did not know each other at all. Honestly, seeing Christy Carlson Romano, Hilary Duff, and Raven on screen at the same time gives me the vibe of that Pepsi commercial with Britney Spears, Beyonce, and Pink. Like, it was really like a meeting of the queens. Like, it was like, it feels like a big deal. Like, they really had the divas of the channel getting on the track, getting in the booth. Like, if they weren't in the same cast together, they probably didn't know each other, according to Christy. And it's just so funny because in these these music videos, which are pretty like stripped down, like there's not a ton in the way of like true storytelling. I think in the Circle of Life one, you have them. I think Christy said that they were in like a nightclub that had been turned into like a karaoke thing. It's like a nightclub and a roller skating rink. Basically, the story is that they're doing like karaoke, so they're singing the Circle of Life. And A Dream Is a Wish Your Heart Makes, they're like recording the song. So you see them like in booths, and like some of them are playing instruments and some of them are like just singing into mics with each other. And then there's like a magical moment where they all put on their best like 2006 formal homecoming dresses and sing the song together. I can't remember who's singing, but it's like the then you can dream, then you can't start that part. And then out of nowhere, Orlando Brown just pushes whoever is singing out of the way. Like he like gently like kind of nudges her out of the way, but like it's his big part. And ever since I was a kid, I was like, why did he push that girl like that? They are essentially the We Are the Worlds for the Disney Channel sphere. Like they are the moments where you get everyone together singing a song, whether they want to or not. And if you want to look nowhere else, look at Ricky Ullman in A Dream Is a Wish Your Heart Makes. That man was not trying to sing. Either he was not trying to sing or they gave him no lines on purpose. This was a man who was like, he was the lead of a major show, Phil of the Future, so he couldn't not be there. But I don't know if he was necessarily a vocalist. Like, I don't know if that was necessarily why he was on the channel. Like, it seemed like he was wanting to be there to act. And then the last and final one in this whole thing is Disney Channel's Friends for Change. Now, this was when they were like, what if we make all of these teens sing for a cause? They were like singing for environmental efforts. This was really big in the late 2000s, early 2010s. A lot of like going green and like green efforts and things like that. If you're not familiar with Friends for Change and Send It On, which is the song that I'm talking about, this was like the dream team of Disney Channel. Like you had Miley Cyrus, Demi Lovato, Selena Gomez, and the Jonas Brothers all on the song at the same time. If you're me in 5th grade, this was a very big deal. Now, mind you, the environmental efforts, yeah, they're singing for the earth, whatever it was, that didn't matter. No one cared about that. They cared that it was all of our faves on a song at the same time. Now, the added layer to that is that there was heavy drama a brewing because Nick Jonas then dated 2 out of the 3 of the girls on the track. I think Demi Lovato and Joe Jonas dated at one point. Kevin's just there. He's like probably like 25 at that point. It was just so much drama and tension that was brewing underneath the surface. And yet those teenagers went in and delivered something so vocally beautiful that I still think about it to this day. Friends for Change Send It On was a once in a lifetime event because I think they did Friends for Change afterwards. Like they did a couple other songs, but it was like, I think the next year they did just Demi Lovato and Joe Jonas. Like they weren't getting that group together. And honestly too, it was kind of like the swan song for this era of Disney Channel as well, because this was released in 2009, and by the time a lot of them in this group had turned 18, they left Disney Channel and they like went on to go and be celebrities and stars and other rights. And this was kind of the end of an era in a lot of ways. Like this was the last moment of Disney Channel as we knew it. Now, of course, it continued on. And clearly, as we saw with Do You Want to Build a Snowman, created all new stars. But the stars that we knew from like that era of Disney Channel, this was like the last moment for it. The Disney Channel music video industrial complex, TM, is incredibly complex. Like there are, I think, multitudes to it. It's not just Disney Channel music and nothing else. Like I do think that there were a lot of levels of artistry that were contained in this music. There was a lot of intention, but there was also like pretty calculated. Like, Disney knew what they were doing by setting up these, teens and preteens who were massively talented in front of our TV screens and had them hold a note because they know that we would buy it. We would want to buy anything that we could that was connected to this brand that they had made us fall in love with. The Disney Channel music video industrial complex can really be summed up in one sentence: an instance of musical history wherein actors insisted upon musical careers and also actors had musical careers insisted upon them. And it was up to you to delineate who was who.